The issue of vote buying resonated at the just concluded by-elections in 4 states of the Federation. Reports have it that the electorate were induced to exercise their franchise in favor of a particular candidate. This development, which seems to become a norm in the nation's polity, is dominating public discourse. Nigeria Today took up the issue a couple of weeks ago when it was noticed in the EKITI state governorship election. On today's edition of the program, we are revisiting the issue with a view of the latest happenings in the just concluded by-elections in KOGI, BAUCHI, KASTINA and Cross River State. Is this development not a thing of concern for key players in the electoral process? What should be done to tame this trend? My guests will provide answers to these and other questions on Nigeria Today. Welcome, I am Dennis Adinumui. I have with me in the studio Mr. David KOGI, Deputy Director and Special Assistant to the Director General of the National Orientation Agency. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much, Dennis.
Let's also welcome Mrs. Esther Uzoma, a legal practitioner, human rights activist, and election monitor. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure.
Well, let's get to the nitty-gritty of this quite controversial issue. Why is vote buying becoming a norm in the political scene, as we have seen in recent times?
Thank you very much, Dennis. The menace. There are various reasons, for the menace of vote buying. Some have argued that poverty is one of it. Some have argued that ignorance, political ignorance, political illiteracy is one of it. And then some others have also suggested that that since power begets power, that is simply a perpetuation of the political dynasty of an existing class. These are some of the reasons persons have proffered. However, whether or not these reasons are reasonable is an entirely different question. But these are some of the reasons why people sell their votes. Another is utter disbelief in the system. Yes.
All right, Mr. KOGI, let's get your perspective on this issue.
I think, in addition to what she has said, it's important to note that the challenge of vote buying is not exactly new. I think the reason why it appears to be drawing more attention today is that the value monetarily of that vote seems to have escalated.
Okay. Right. So there's more incentive financially for the voter. Okay.
Yes, for the vote. Prior to this time, the incentive came in the form of salt, Maggi cubes, and some sachets of sugar, if you like. But today we are seeing incentives coming in Naira and Kobo. Okay. And in value that are really enticing, especially to our rural folks, and those at the lower cadre of the rung of our society.
All right, let's get a legal perspective on this matter. Is there anything in the Constitution or the law that's against
the Electoral Act is an offense that is prohibited. Before now, treating, was the practice. People got vodka, Cuban cigars, for votes. But as politics evolved, I'm talking about in the Western countries, in Nigeria here, this is a practice that is prohibited. There's no doubt about it. But because of the scale of the commission of the offense, because of the conspiracy, of the various actors, then, it's overwhelming. What do you do when over 100,000 people are committing the offense at the same time? Who will you arrest? Where will you incarcerate? Where will you prosecute? You know, so we have a system that is already burdened. So there's pressure that has been brought to bear again on this by this particular deliberate, reckless behavior of the political class. So we must evolve, you know, and learn our way through out of this present quagmire.
Okay, Mr. Akoje, would you say that this clamor for the establishment of the Electoral Offences Commission would help alleviate some of these issues that Mrs.
Yes, I think that in addition, you know, to a couple of other actions, would indeed address the challenge. Some of those actions would include voter education, you know. Voter education in terms of the fact that a lot of these people who sell these votes do not know the full implication of what they are doing. If you sell your vote, you jettison the right to ask questions if you don't get service delivery. And the whole purpose of voting ought to be in anticipation of receiving some particular kind of service from those that you have voted into power. We need to really, really increase voter education, especially at the rural levels. People don't know the implication of what they're doing, you know. And if the problem persists the way it is, then we're going to start seeing a lot of criminals who have money being voted into power. And the long-term implication of that should not be lost on those who are actually committing these crimes.
Okay, so you're thinking ahead of next year's general elections, maybe the National Assembly can move towards expediting laws that will, you know, tighten up, you know, regulations on this matter.
Yeah, what we think actually is there are existing organizations of government who are supposed to collaborate to ensure that this voter education is deep-rooted. INEC cannot do it alone, certainly. Their core mandate is in the area of election organization, voter registration, and all of that. The National Orientation Agency has as its core mandate sensitization and awareness creation, voter education, voter mobilization, peace building in the communities. So I would say that synergy between INEC and the National Orientation Agency is extremely expedient as part of the entire potpourri of solutions that will address this problem.
Okay, Mrs. Uzoma. Yes. Given the scale of the population we have in this country, this idea of sensitizing the public and creating awareness of the detrimental effects of this voter buying, how do you see it going through?
I frankly do not think it's ignorance. I frankly do not think, you know, that it's poverty or ignorance of the consequence. I think people make that deliberate choice because of lack of belief in the system. Perhaps they will ask themselves, I voted, you know, in the last 4 elections, my children are who are graduates are not employed. I'm voting again, nothing is getting better. I'm voting again, 19 budgets after, we still do not have drugs. So I believe strongly that people make these choices because there is that lack of patriotism that should burn in the hearts of citizens. We have not come. We do not have an electorate that looks at Nigeria as our Nigeria. They know it's a crime. They know there's a punishment for it. But they think, oh, it is their government. Oh, it is their business. Oh, this is all we have. So until we realize, they do it deliberately. I accosted one woman who was buying votes, who sold her votes in EKITI. She told me that, well, that she's taking this 5,000 because rice, adult-sized rice, a plate costs 200 naira. So that 5,000 makes a whole lot of difference for somebody. So they know it, but it's just that nobody has harnessed our diversity.
Okay.
So people do it knowing it's not an unconscious act. It is deliberate. It is premeditated. Sometimes you find what we see in the field. Sometimes there's pre-election vote buying. For instance, in primaries, monies are freely given. and obtained. Then there's also post-election. Yes, there are people who voted on credit. Okay. And then they line up to collect in an orderly manner to collect their loot. So I think people have decided. So we must resurrect the belief in this country.
There's certainly a need for greater reorientation and imbibing that this change mantra that federal government has been harping on about. Okay, let's move on to the polling booths themselves. Do you think, Mr. Akoja, that the polling booths could be repositioned during elections to make it difficult and hard for prospective voters to succumb to vote buying?
Extremely important as part of the solutions to tackle this problem of vote buying. I have heard that INEC is working towards this, to position the polling booth in such a manner that party agents would not be able to collude with voters so as to easily see how they have voted to make them qualified to get that incentive, which is the price of the vote. I think that's extremely important, to tackle this problem. If those who are providing this money as incentive become aware that they would not be able to determine how the person voted, and they would spend this money and perhaps not get the value for what they have spent the money, it will be a big disincentive. That's an approach, and I think it's extremely important for INEC to work in that direction. Now, with regards to people being aware, people know when they are committing sin, but nevertheless they still commit sin. It becomes the responsibility of the preacher to consistently preach the consequences of sin and the fact that sin is negative. Peradventure, over time, you would get converts. That approach is extremely relevant also in solving this problem. And that's where the synergy between INEC and National Orientation Agency is extremely important and advisable. We must continue to talk about it.
Okay, on the part of the politicians themselves, what would you say needs to be done to, reorient them as well concerning national issues as opposed to getting as many votes as possible?
This is what we have noticed with respect to this challenge. We have noticed that there's serious disconnect between the electorate and elected officials. A lot of these elected officials pretend to have constituency offices. If you do your research, you would find out that next to nothing happens in those constituency offices. What we have done at the National Orientation Agency is we are in a partnership with Konrad Adenauer Foundation. And we've set up a platform that's called Stewardship and Accountability Platform. This platform is organized to bring the electorate in face-to-face sitting with their representatives, and then they raise fundamental issues. They interrogate the electorate. Now, we think that if this is encouraged much, and if there's a monitoring and evaluation system to ensure that there's constant engagement between the electorates and their elected officials, then the electorate will see value beyond that day of election. Presently, value is seen only in terms of that day of election.
Okay, Mrs. Uzama, let's get your perspective.
You see, eternal vigilance is the price of liberty. The Nigerian citizen must rouse, we must come out from that comfort zone. We can no longer sit, as we are playing games, chilling out and saying, oh, government, government. You are the government. How does it happen that the dropouts in schools are the ones who are now winning? You see people who dropped out of school, won't do homework, are hooked out on drugs. Somehow they emerge as political, leaders. How? Because the brilliant one said, I will not participate. So it is if until the Nigerian citizens decide to arise, nothing works until we walk it. Okay. Yes.
So the power is with the people.
Oh,
basically.
Yes.
Okay, well, we'll continue our discussion shortly, but time to take our discussions out of the studio for a while. Our correspondent was out earlier in the day to ask Nigerians what they think. Let's hear the people's view on vote buying.
Vote buying is it can be considered as an illegal aspect of voting, a situation whereby either the candidate is not credible, either whatsoever, he only gives you money in order to vote for him. So definitely it has side effect, because by the time you have been given that opportunity to vote for a credible person, and you have wasted that advantage of you just, it's like you use your hand in order to damage yourself again.
Vote buying is the newest rigging style and tricks that politicians are using now. And it's very unfortunate because it's taken us like 20 years behind.
Because he didn't know his right. Whoever sells his vote, he didn't know his right. That's why.
It's not the right thing to do. You cannot sell your conscience or sell your future for a peanut. It's not the best.
No, it's not good at all. It's a spoil our future. To give money and buy votes, spoiling our future, the future of our country. And at the same time, you cannot a credible candidate. That's the disadvantage. Yes.
Well, we've got some views of members of the public there. They're quite honest and about the negatives of that issue. Mrs. Zuma, what would you say this portends for the nation's democracy?
Oh, it's a rape of our democracy. It is a desecration of our electoral process. You know, it makes a mess. In fact, it's a challenge to our humanity. Let our people realize, when somebody who has not paid salary for 7 months, and on election day, he's giving you pepper, he's giving salt, he's giving 500 naira. Do not take that money, because that person does not value you. So if we move forward, because like my colleague said, he said, until we come to that point where it's impossible for the politician or for the electorate to display, their choice, so that when you vote, nobody will know who you voted for. All right? The politician will not waste their money. And even as we are doing that, as just like the viewers, said, we must come to that point where people look the politician and say, listen, I will not take this money. We have to save our country.
Mr. Akoja, what's your perspective on this? What does this portend for Nigeria's democracy going forward?
Grave danger. Very, very serious danger. We run the risk going forward, if this trend continues unchecked, of jettisoning programs and policies, no matter how laudable those are, for the money. We run the risk as a country of coming to a point in our electoral process where people will not even bother to sell their programs and policies and activities to the electorate. They simply would just wait and keep their money, and then on the day of elections, without any credible programs, without any credible policies, simply just buy these votes. Now, if that happens, then those who are selling their votes should know, if they don't already know, that there would be no accountability to them. They would lose the right to ask questions, morally and practically. And so if they don't get service, then it's really their fault.
Okay. Ms. Uzoma, you were recently in the EKITI, like you were saying. Just give us some of your experiences when you were observing.
Well, the votes were bought and sold in an orderly manner.
In an orderly manner? So
yes.
Something illegal was done in an orderly manner?
Oh, it was. In EKITI, it was see and buy.
Okay.
In KOGI, the reports we got from our colleagues on the field was that it was election souvenir. You were given a pack. So it keeps evolving. In Edo, it was follow who know road. These phrases are evolved by the people themselves. So in EKITI, people queued up, voted, displayed their choices, either went to the right or to the left, queued up again in an orderly manner to collect. It was very, very organized. So, and I know that the security agencies will be overwhelmed. The answer to this menace is that Nigerians must decide to stop.
Okay, staying with you, by-elections are coming up in Osun. What are you hoping to see?
Wow, Oshun is sitting up already. We're making plans. Situation room, Nigerian Civil Society Situation Room will definitely reconvene in Oshun. And we're using various platforms to educate people on the power of the votes. We are resurrecting ideals, you know, for modern Nigeria. We're telling them that in this vote is water, access roads is in this singular vote, electricity, maternal mortality, if everything is in that vote. So before you give it away for 1,000, before you give it away for 500, know that you are giving much, much more, you know, for peanuts, you know, or for porridge. Do not sell this backtrack. So we are mobilizing, we'll reconvene, and then we are educating and we'll watch the process. But definitely, there will be scapegoats.
For sure.
Yes.
Mr. Kogi, you know, the Oshun by-elections are coming up as well. What are you hoping to see different from what we saw in EKITI and recent by-elections?
We have done a review of the elections in EKITI and these by-elections that have happened in KASTINA and other places. In EKITI, what we did in the build-up to the election was we deployed men and resources. And we taught virtually all the local governments in EKITI with our outdoor orientation van, which is capable of showing video on the move, as well as jingles. We did a lot of education, like she said, drawing attention to the fact that people should hold their vote sacred, they should not sell it, and they should vote in accordance with their conscience for people that they believe would bring service, you know, to them. We will replicate this in Oshun. You know, we hope, like I have mentioned here, to build synergy with INEC to ensure that we taught the local governments in Oshun with the same messages, and then we hold community engagements to really enlighten them, you know, on the need to stay focused and to vote in accordance with their conscience as to who would bring service rather than sell that vote.
But, like you said, the electorate, it's for them, regardless of all the enlightenment and awareness programs. It is them. They have to make the choice themselves. I mean, how can that be ultimately achieved? You know, to disorient them from, you know, going down the wrong path.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of synergy. I expect that because of what we saw in EKITI, as well as in KASTINA and some of these other places, that the security agencies will up their game and that they would also be on the lookout to dissuade these type of actions that are done so openly. You know, that they would take actions to ensure that, if not completely eliminated, that the incidence of this public vote selling and buying and trading would be significantly reduced. That's my expectation of the security agencies. We will continue to engage with the politicians themselves, you know, and to get them to see the fact that it's a big shame. It's not only Nigeria that witnesses these elections. International observers come around. So it's a shame and an embarrassment to our nation if this goes on unbridled. So from the National Orientation Agency, we will do as much as we can.
Okay. Let's just go back to the legal standpoint on this matter. Is there anything actually in the law specifically that talks about this?
Yes, the Electoral Act provides punishment for vote buying.
Okay. And
then there's also an option of fine. But what the problem is, when policemen are deployed for elections, they are posted from various states. So to complete the circuit of investigation and prosecution, it takes time. By the time the files are ready to proceed to court, these officers will have gone back to their places of primary assignment. This is once again making a very strong case for the Electoral Offences Commission. Yes. So, granted that it's overwhelming, but in Oshun, specific steps will be taken, all right? Especially the big wigs who decides deliberately to flout the law and rub into the faces of Nigerians will take deliberate steps to record their excesses and then pursue their, you know, watch the brief of their prosecution. Yes, town hall meetings will also be, you know, we'll have town hall meetings. Nigerian Civil Society Situation Room will have town hall meetings, just like we had in EKITI. We also have in Oshun. so that we'll tell people about all this and then further enlighten them of the preparedness of the law enforcement agencies, steps to start taking positive steps. And we're going to see increased privacy of the ballot, by INEC, so that their choices of electorates will not be displayed.
Okay.
Yes.
What would you say is the way out of vote buying looking ahead to the 2019 general elections? Briefly, please.
Nigerians decide.
Nigerians decide.
We must decide not to. We must look the politician in the face and say, we do not want this money. It's blood money. That is one strong way out.
Okay, Mr. KOGI.
There are three factors at play. One of them is the politicians who actually bring out the money to buy these votes. The second is the ordinary rural folks who collect this money and actually vote because they have collected the money, not because they are convinced that a particular candidate will bring the kind of value and service that they require. The third leg of the matter is our security agencies. And I think they have a big role to play also. So with regards to the politicians who bring out the money, the disincentive is for INEC to go ahead and make voting more private, to the extent that an electorate can vote without necessarily needing to show or being able to show his vote.
Okay.
So if you give him money, he can walk away with the money and still vote for the person that his conscience dictates.
Okay, well, I'd like to appreciate your comments. That is a wrap on the chat on Nigeria Today. I would like to appreciate our guests for taking their time with us. Firstly, I'd like to thank Mrs. Esther Uzoma, who's a legal practitioner and human rights activist, and Mr. David Akoji, the Deputy Director and Special Assistant to the DG of the National Orientation Agency. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thanks for being a part of it. For you, the viewers, for joining us on the program. And remember, you can watch Nigeria Today online at www.youtube.com/NTA News 24 Hub. I am Dennis Adigwe. Enjoy the rest of your evening.